Questions around the integration of all their social media channels and then linking that to their SEO to be found online. Yeah. Do you want to dive in?
Yes. So people were essentially using the home page. So there would usually be in the top left or right-hand corner, a series of icons. So that then you would see YouTube next to Twitter, next to LinkedIn, and so on. And people would be able to see that you can connect to their communities in that way. As regards them kind of deliberately using it for SEO, I suppose that's kind of a bit of a challenging thing to be able to audit, because you've got to be able to get a sense of the actual user stats for the actual site. So that wasn't something that we were able to pick up. I mean, it's worth noting that with LinkedIn, because LinkedIn is very, very well optimized on Google, though, so that if you've got a very prominent company profile, you can actually get lots of hits back to your site. But yes, I suppose one of these things is if you've got Google Analytics, if we can actually go to these sites and look at Google Analytics, we could get a sense of where these links were coming from, where these hits were coming from. But we didn't have that level of insight, unfortunately.
If I can just add to that, because I didn't go into the SEO bit of using social media, but it really helps big time, because especially if for things like Twitter, you use your real name, like I've done, as your Twitter name. It really boosts if somebody, I've got an unusual name, so it's easy for me. But if you've got a slightly more common name and people put in, your name followed by lawyer, and you've got a LinkedIn profile, or put your name in and you've got that name as your Twitter handle, you're much more. The law firm probably ranks fairly highly anyway if it's a big law firm.
I think I think one of the things I'd add to that, it comes down to your overall content strategy. So anything that you then have online is then going to be found across multiple networks. And I think some of the benefits of linking it back to your own website is that you actually be able to point people to that additional content. One of the things, 2 points that I'd like to raise from the audit were on the point of Twitter accounts. Some firms are naming their Twitter accounts in an unrelated way to their firm. So as Danvers has used his individual name, if you Google Danvers, you'll actually see LinkedIn profile, Twitter profile, and other bits, which is how I then got to talk to him by finding him. Oh, well, he's actually come up in a lot of search results. He must be a decent guy. He knows his stuff. One particular law firm that we audited, we had a real problem trying to find their Twitter feed. But actually going to their website, I was then able to find that they had a followers on Twitter on their website, which then took me to their Twitter account, which was a completely unrelated name. It was some initials _ something else. And it wasn't really what I was looking for. So that was one point on the audit that was a big flag for me. The other thing for blogs as well, with the audit, we didn't see very many law firms under their own brand blogging. So that might be one question in terms of how we approach that. But individuals buy from lawyers, they're not necessarily buying from the firm brand. So from that as a strategy, do you as a firm decide to set up your blog as an individual lawyer that then goes under the umbrella brand of where you are? And that's almost like Boot Law with Pinsent Masons, with Winston Strawn that Danvers has done. He's able to take that with him. So there's,
targets to meet billable hours and all the rest. It seems like that was quite an effort on your part. Did you sleep at all? How did you manage that?
It really was, because we'd come off a big case and we needed some work. And if I'd been in the sort of happy position of an associate just being given too much work to do, we wouldn't have bothered. The fact was we didn't have enough to do, so this was our way of generating it. The only problem is when you're a lawyer, if you generate it, you generally have to do it, which is why I'm glad I'm in a bigger firm now, where I've got people to help me with it. But I think the great thing about Boot Law from a sort of marketing discipline point of view was that we just decided to do it month in, month out, come what may. And at the beginning, we were like spending hours rehearsing it. And by sort of a year in, we'd sort of meet up for a chat 5 minutes beforehand and just do it. And we got much better at presenting and dealing with the events. And our PA sort of was an absolute trooper in setting up the room and doing all of that. So it kind of, you sort of set yourself an unachievable goal and then just somehow you do it. But I think the danger with marketing is that it always comes last in your list of priorities. So we just, some days, we didn't get as much sleep as we should have done.
I think one of the other questions I asked Danvers when I first met him was, obviously you're so prolific, so when do you do it? How often do you tweet? What do you tweet? And are you doing it during your commute? Are you doing it in the morning? Are you doing it whenever you find something? And I think you can give the answer that you gave me, which was no set rules.
Yeah, absolutely. I have no idea. You have to look at my Twitter feed and work it out, because I don't have any targets to tweet, thank God. Yeah, it's just sort of when something takes my fancy, or when something occurs to me as being entertaining. I'll be out with my kids and take a photo of them at the weekend, and I'll tweet that, and that will get loads of responses, and I'll then tweet some fast.
Going off on their own and doing stuff, is there sign of procedures for that, or do you just go for it and you don't really have many links with the marketing team?
No, I get on really well with the marketing at Pinson Masons, but when I joined them in February, we already had Bootlaw up and running, and it was we kind of knew what we were doing by then. I think it was more at Winston and Strawn when we just didn't tell anybody what we were doing quite deliberately, because it's much better, that thing, to beg for forgiveness afterwards than ask for permission first, because you know what the answer is going to be.
You did mention to me, though, that Pinson Masons are now putting into effect a social media policy.
They are, which is sort of unrelated, and it's not going to stop us. I don't know what it says yet, but but it's not intended to stop anybody. But it was interesting with Winston, which was we got some rumblings through sort of various back channels that this was thought as not really with the brand, the fact we were giving startups beer and pizza, and it was all a bit sort of edgy. And then we got some coverage, which I didn't mention in my presentation. We got some coverage, I think, in the FT, and that was the first time the firm had been covered in the FT for about 2 years. We got a little funny diary piece in the Times. And then suddenly we were generating what they regarded as sort of valuable PR, and they decided they loved it. And then last year we were on the telly, on the BBC and stuff, and they thought this was brilliant, that they had lawyers kind of getting out there and basically doing their job for them. But we became great friends.
We do have one pre-submitted question, actually, from someone who couldn't attend this evening. It's in regard to the use of LinkedIn with administration. So those of you who might be familiar, for example, if you've set up a firm profile on there, you've got somebody who sets that up underneath within their current LinkedIn account, and they're then the administrator for your company profile within LinkedIn. Equally, you might be inviting your company contacts. So if you're somebody in sales, you're going to be inviting those contacts to connect with you on LinkedIn. So one of the questions for Danvers or Helena was around if that person leaves the organisation, how do you then ensure that administrative control of that group gets passed on? Because that is then controlled underneath that individual's account. And equally then with the non-solicitation, if people leave your sales organisation, how do you then stop them on that non-compete clause or whatever clauses you want to have in place that are normally enforced under that compromise agreement, non-compete or whatever, that they don't solicit business through their LinkedIn?
Well, I think LinkedIn rides the coach and horses through non-compete provisions, because people go to another firm and immediately they update their LinkedIn profile, and suddenly all their contacts know where they are and how to contact them. And they're not doing any soliciting because people can contact them.
I've seen as people are leaving firms, one of the terms of compromise agreements being that they need to sever links with existing clients and not on LinkedIn and not recontact.
Well,
in the same way as you can, part of the employment contract is that you won't continue to contact a firm's client by email or by phone. You can say as part of a compromise that they can have no contact going forward with X, Y, and it's all visible. So you can look on LinkedIn, see the clients that you don't want them to be contacting, and make that a term of them getting their payout.
But it's not going to be that effective, is it? Because they defriend them or whatever on LinkedIn, but it doesn't mean that you are then invisible to them on LinkedIn.
But the helpful thing about
they might be a bit offended and never want to talk to you because you've defriended them.
They may be. The helpful thing is that if contact going forward is through LinkedIn, that kind of third party, you've got somewhere you can find the evidence you might need. So, and if someone breaches a non-compete clause, going forward by emailing them or phoning them, and then the work girls elsewhere, it's quite difficult to track that down. But if you suspect it happened through LinkedIn, you can get disclosure orders and you can get those messages. So actually the LinkedIn angle is really interesting.
Okay.
And I think also the other point about controlling accounts and stuff. I mean, I think you just have to use a bit of common sense there, don't you? And just make sure that if there are group accounts, that more than one person knows what the password is, and if someone's leaving, you change it and don't tell them what it is.